Start today in the bottom of the Pesachim with base, 5 lines from the bottom. Omar Mar. We learned yesterday in a Braisa where it speaks about a case where you had 5 people that brought a carbon Pesach, and then the hides of the animals afterwards got mixed one with another, and then they discover a mum in one of them. So one of those karbanos were not valid, and you don't know who it is. So the Braisa said that they're potter to bring the Pesach Sheni if they found out only after the Zrike. That's what we learned yesterday. But now the Gemara asks, Pesach Sheni. So it says here that all of them are potter from bringing a Pesach Sheni. But nafik. 4 of them, their carbon Pesach was valid, and one of them it was a Balmun. So one of them, the carbon Pesach was not valid. So why are they all potter of bringing a Pesach Sheni? One of them should have to bring a Pesach Sheni. Says the Gemara, Mishum Deloy Efsha, because it's impossible to have any of them bring a Pesach Sheni. And the Gemara here is going to go through a very long discussion till the Mishnah to explain why it's impossible. Heichi Lavid. What should we do in such a case? So, Laisi Kol Chad V'Chad Pesach. Would you say that all of them should bring a carbon Pesach? We don't know who it is that has to bring a Pesach Sheni. So are you going to say that all of them should bring a Pesach Sheni because it's a suffix? Can't do that. Kamaisi Cholon La'azara. You're bringing Cholon La'azara. Only one of them is a real carbon Pesach, but the other 4, it's Cholon. So you can't bring Cholon into the Azara. The Arba Minaya Avdeluhu. 4 of them already brought their carbon Pesach. Laisi Kulu Chat Pesach. So how about if all of them will bring 1 carbon Pesach, they'll all be counted on 1 carbon Pesach Sheni. And the one that has to will be Yaitze with that Pesach Sheni. You can't do that either. Nimtza Pesach Nechal Shaloy Lemenuyav. You're counting people on the carbon Pesach that are not supposed to eat from it at all. And you can't do that on a carbon Pesach. It's Nechal Shaloy Lemenuyav. It's being eaten by people that are not counted on it, not supposed to be counted on the carbon Pesach. So the Gemara says, wait, but there's still, we can do something else. Hi, what is the problem over here? Naisi kolchad minayu pischai. Let each one of them bring a carbon Pesach and the nisni, and you can make the following condition. And will say as follows: if it was my carbon Pesach that was the balmum, and I'm the one that's now obligated to bring a Pesach Sheni, so hi the icy hashte nehevi Pesach. So the carbon I'm bringing now is a carbon Pesach. But tam, if I'm the one that had a good carbon Pesach the first time, so then hi the icy hashte. So the one that I'm bringing now nehevi shlomim. Should be a carbon shlomim. As we learned many times before, that a Pesach, when it's not a Pesach, it becomes a shlomim. So make this condition. If I need it, it's a Pesach. Otherwise, it's a shlomim. So what's the problem to make this condition? Says the Gemara, no, there is a problem. Lo yafsha, you can't make this condition. Why not? Mishum de'ike chaza v'shaik. There is 2 parts of the animal, the chaza and the shaik, the thigh and the breast, the kayanim udachlilei, that it has to go to the kayanim by the carbon shlomim. And not by the carbon Pesach. The carbon Pesach, you have to eat the whole Pesach. You don't give it to the Kainim. If you give it to the Kainim, it's Shaloi Lemenuyav. So you're going to have to eat it. So what are you going to do over here with this carbon? 4 of them have to be a Shlomim, but you don't know which one is the Shlomim, so you can't give it to the Kain. So there's still a problem here. Says the Gemara, if that's the issue, that you have to give the Kain the Chazav V'Shaik, so if so, V'naisi Kol Chad V'Chad, Kain Bahadei. So why don't you join a kayin on each one of these karbanas? Join a kayin together with this carbon. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. This kayin, how are you joining him on this carbon here? Hi kayin heichidami. Which kayin are you joining on this karbanas? Ida Ovid Pesach. Are you talking about a kayin that already brought a carbon Pesach? So then how could you join him in the carbon? Dilma hai Pesachu. One of them, and maybe this one, is a carbon Pesach. V'nimtza Pesach nechal shaloi lemenuyav. So then it comes out that you're joining a kain on the carbon, and the kain is eating from the carbon Pesach, even though he's not supposed to be counted on it. He already brought his first carbon Pesach. V'deloyav Pesach. If you're joining a kain that did not bring a carbon Pesach yet, so dil mishlamimu. So one of them, or 4 of them actually, are carbon shlamim. And maybe what the kain is eating is going to be a shlamim. V'lo yavet Pesach. So you're going to join 5 kainim on these 5 karbanas. 4 of them are going to be eating from a carbon shlamim. And they did not bring a carbon Pesach yet. So what's this eitzah of having a kain join these karbanas? It doesn't work. Frek the Gemara, but you can still do it differently. V'naisi kulu, the Bach says, chamisha chad kain. All 5 karbanas have 1 kayin join in all 5 of the karbanis. Count the lo yavet Pesach, a kayin that did not yet bring a carbon Pesach. So include this kayin, count this kayin in all 5 of the karbanis. and v'nimni ilavei, and it should be counted on them. V'nimni ilavei hani chamisha Pesachim, and let him be counted on all 4 of them. So we know that one of them did not bring a carbon pesach yet. So if he's going to be counted on all 5 of these karbanis, we know that one of them is a carbon pesach, and he's going to be yaitza, right? Because the point over here is this kayin eats from the chazav v'shaik even if it's not a carbon pesach. So even if it's a carbon shlamim, he could eat the chazav v'shaik. And the one that is the carbon pesach, he's also going to eat the chazav v'shaik. And there, the one that is the carbon pesach will be yaitza his mitzvah of carbon pesach. So if all of them are going to count one kain on each one of these karbanis, so then that should work. Whether it's a shlamim, whether it's a pesach, the kain could eat from it and he's going to be yaitza his mitzvah. So there's no issue. So going back to what we said before, why can't each one of them bring the carbon and make a condition if it's a shlamim for me? Because I already brought my carbon pesach, so it's a shlamim. If it's a pesach, so then it'll be, because I have to bring a carbon pesach, so then it's a carbon pesach. Our question was that there's a chazav v'shaik that the kayin has to eat. So let one kayin eat the chazav v'shaik of all of these karbanis, and then he'll be yaitza his mitzvah of carbon pesach on the one which is actually a carbon pesach.
How do you put one person to a group?
Oh, so you can't. You can't have one person be counted on more than one carbon pesach, which we learned yesterday. But over here, out of these 5, there is only one carbon pesach. The other 4 are carbon shlamim. So he's only going to be eating from one carbon pesach, and from the other 4, he's going to be eating a chazav v'shaik. The only thing is, he's going to have a lot of meat to eat in one day from all of these karbanos. Okay. How he's going to do this, he's going to have to share it with his family and other people. But the problem is he can't because it's a carbon pesach, so he has to eat it all himself. So I guess there's going to be a lot of meat he has to eat over here. So the Gemara, Elo. So the problem over here is, going back to the original point that we made, why shouldn't you make this condition? If it's a shlamim, it's a shlamim. If it's a pesach, it's a pesach. That doesn't work. Because there's a difference in the timing of how long you can eat the carbon. The carbon pesach, the ilu pesach, liyom v'layla. A carbon pesach is only eaten for the day and the following night. You can't eat it the next day at all. But v'ilu shlamim l'shnei yomim v'layla echad. The carbon shlamim, you can eat it for 2 days and the night in between. So what's going to happen over here? All of them, you don't know which is the carbon pesach. So the following morning, you're going to have to consider all of them to be nicer and burn it then. And really, 4 of them are carbon shlamim. So it ends up that you're burning meat as nicer, which is still really kachim. So how could you do that? So therefore there's a problem with the timing of the eating. So let's do it slightly differently. So till here we were saying that a person should make a condition and say, if I need a Pesach, it'll be a Pesach. If I need a Shlamim, it'll be a Shlamim. But now the Gemara says, V'neisi Meisera Pesach. Let a person make a condition and say that if this is a leftover of a Pesach, let it be a leftover of a Pesach. What does this mean? So we learned already before, what happens if a person was makdish an extra carbon Pesach and he didn't need it for the carbon? What happens to that carbon Pesach? It's later brought as a shlamim. But there's actually one distinction between a shlamim and a leftover carbon Pesach, which is like a shlamim. The timing of the eating. The timing of the eating of a leftover carbon Pesach is the same as a carbon Pesach, only for a day and a night. So if the Gemara now is saying, if the problem that you have is that the shlamim and the carbon pesach don't have the same timing for the eating, so let him be makdish, an extra carbon pesach, and then bring that extra carbon pesach as a shlamim, and then the timing of the eating will be the same as the carbon pesach, and v'neime, and then let him make the condition, as we said before, idi balmum, if my first carbon pesach was a balmum, so haidai si hashta nevi pesach. So the carbon that I'm bringing now is a carbon pesach for me. And idi tam, if the first carbon pesach I brought was good, there was a tam so then a heavy haida I see hashta shlomim. So now the carbon that I'm bringing, this extra carbon pesach, will turn into a shlomim. And now over here we don't have the problem with the timing of the eating. The meisera pesach nechal liyom b'layla echad. Because the leftover of a carbon pesach that becomes a shlomim, it still has the timing of eating like a carbon pesach for a day and a night. Fragt the Gemara, could you do such a thing? Are you allowed to be makdish an extra carbon pesach, lichat chila, knowing that you're not even going to need it, and then the leftovers will be for a shlamim? You're not supposed to do this. In a case where a person was makdish a carbon pesach, and for example it got lost, and then he was makdish an extra one, and then he finds it, so then you use it for a shlamim. But you're not allowed to do this lichat chila. Fragt the Gemara, okay, true, you're not allowed to do this lechatchila, but v'nitrchu v'naisi ma'aser Pesach. Why don't we ask these people that have this suffix to go and try to find a ma'aser korban Pesach from all the thousands of Yidden? So Rashi says whether you could find the leftover actual behema, actual carbon, or even extra money. The extra money that a person was makdish for a korban Pesach, and he didn't need all the money for the carbon. What happens with that money? That money also becomes a ma'aser korban Pesach. So maybe they should go and find extra money or carbon of a korban Pesach. So we can still have the eitzah that we said before, that you make a t'nai, and you say, if I need a korban Pesach, it'll be a korban Pesach, and if not, I'm going to use a ma'aser korban Pesach. Says the Gemara, Ella, so rather the reason why you can't make this kind of a t'nai is a different thing. There's another distinction between a korban Pesach and a korban shlomim. What is that? Mishum smicha. Because when it comes to a korban Pesach, there is no smicha. And when it comes to a korban shlomim, there is smicha. Dilu Pesach boy smicha. Vilu maisar, the leftover of a Pesach, which becomes a shlomim, boy smicha. Smicha has to be done with it. So what's the issue of doing smicha with a korban that does not need smicha? So Rashi says the issue is you're using kachim. You're doing an aveda. You're leaning on the kachim. When you do the smicha, you have to be saimich b'chol koicha. You have to lean on it with your entire might. So you're using something of kachim which you're not supposed to. So how are you going to be able to do smicha on these karbanis? Because maybe it's really not a korban Pesach. Maybe it's a shlomim. If you might be using one of them, which is a korban Pesach, and really it's you're not allowed to do smicha with it. So that's the issue. The whole issue over here is the smicha. So it's interesting. Taisus points out the whole mitzvah of doing smicha on a korban is only lechatchila. If you don't do smicha on a korban, the korban is kosher. So it comes out a very interesting thing. Here we have an issue of a person that did not bring the first korban Pesach. We don't know who it is, but there's somebody that did not bring the first korban Pesach. And if you don't bring a korban Pesach, that's a major thing. That's kodesh. And here we're saying the only reason we're not allowing him to bring this in this way and make this condition is because of the smicha, which is just a mitzvah lechatchila. And because of that, we prevent this person of bringing his korban Pesach, which is kodesh. So how could that be? So Taisus over here says, yes, true, kodesh, the korban Pesach is kodesh, and the smicha is only a mitzvah lechatchila. But yet, over here, when you're doing smicha, you're allowing a person bikum vaseh to do an action of being soimich on the kachim, of using the kachim with an action. A person that's not going to be bringing his korban Pesach, it's b'shev al tasa. He's not doing something right now to get this kodesh. It's b'shev al tasa. So therefore, we can't allow a person to be over something bikum vaseh, even if it's only such a light matter, because the kodesh that he for the korban Pesach is b'shev al tasa. That's the pshat of Taisus in this Gemara here. Sagt the Gemara weiter. The issue of smicha only applies to a carbon brought by men. Carbon noshim ma'ikalamema. But when it comes to a carbon of women, where the Gemara learns out that there's no mitzvah of smicha by the women, so over there's no issue. The Braisa says this halacha, it doesn't make any distinction. But l'chayra, there should be a distinction between the men and the women. Ella says the Gemara, there's another difference. There's another difference between the carbon Pesach and the Meiser Pesach or the Shlomim. Mishom matonis, when it comes to the way the blood is put on the mizbeach, it's not the same. V'ilu Pesach matona achas, the blood of the mizbeach is just once sprinkled on the mizbeach. V'ilu shlamim shtayim shein dalet, the korban shlamim has to be sprinkled on the corners of the mizbeach twice in a way that it's shtayim shein dalet. So it's not the same thing. So that's the issue of the way the blood is sprinkled on the mizbeach. So you can't make this condition. You're not going to know how to sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach. Says the Gemara, that's the issue. That's not a problem. My nafkemina. What difference does it make if you sprinkle the blood this way or that way? But v'hatnan, we learned in the Mishnah, kol anitanan al mizbeach achitzen. All of those karbanis that you sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach that's outside, shenasnan b'matona achas. If you just sprinkle the blood once, kippur, you're already mechaper. So b'diavad, it's good enough even if you did it once. Ella, says the Gemara, there's another issue when it comes to the way you give the blood on the mizbeach. Mishum de'ilu Pesach b'shvicha. The carbon Pesach, the blood is not sprinkled on the mizbeach from a distance. You have to come right near the mizbeach and pour it on the mizbeach. V'ilu shlamim b'zrike. By carbon shlamim, the way it has to be done is you have to sprinkle it from a distance. You're spraying it on the mizbeach, so it's not the same thing. So you can't make this condition. If you don't know what's what, you're not going to know if you should pour it or if you should spray it on the mizbeach. So again, the Gemara asks, "My nafkemina." What difference does it make if you do it this way or that way? For Tanya, we learned in the Braise, Kol Anitonim Bezrike, all of those korbanos that are supposed to be, the blood is supposed to be sprayed on the Mizbeach, Shenasnam Beshviche, and you only poured it on the Mizbeach, Yotza, you're Yaitze, it's okay. So you see that you are Yaitze. Says the Gemara, but Eimer, the Kamrinon, when do you say that you're Yaitze? That's only Diavad. B'diavad, you're Yaitze if you pour it on the Mizbeach. But l'chatchila nami, l'chatchila, do we say such a thing? We don't say l'chatchila that you're allowed to pour the blood on the Mizbeach that's supposed to be sprayed. So that's the problem over here of making this condition of bringing the carbon and making a condition that if it's a shlamim, it'll be a shlamim, and if it's it's an issue because this has to be b'shviche and this has to be b'zrike. So, and the Gemara here clearly is saying that this is only an issue of l'chatchila, and yet, like I pointed out before, Taisva says because of this issue l'chatchila, we're not going to allow a person to bring his carbon Pesach, even though the carbon Pesach is an issue of Kodesh. Okay, now we go back to the halachas of Lemenuyov, of counting people on the carbon Pesach.
There's no answer.
So that's therefore that goes back to the first beginning of the Gemara, Mishum Delo Yafsha, that it's impossible, you can't do anything, so therefore, you don't bring anything. Zakta Mishnah Aim Lebanov, a person that tells his children, Hareini Sheichet Es Pesach, I am shechting my Pesach. And who am I going to include in the carbon Pesach? Who am I going to count in this carbon Pesach? Al mi sheyala mikem rishayin LeYerushalayim, the one that will come first to Yerushalayim. So kivim shehichnes harishayin reishay v'rubai. So as soon as the first of his children enters into Yerushalayim with most of his head and body, zocha bechelkai. He's zocha in his part, in his portion that his father counted him in. Umezake es echa v'imay. And then he could also include his brothers with him. What does this mean? How could he include his brothers with him? The father said that he's only counting the one that's going to come first to Yerushalayim. So the Gemara will explain, we'll see right here, the Gemara explains how this works. So the Gemara, the first part of the Mishnah, what did it say over here? A father's shechting a carbon Pesach, and he has no idea who's coming first into Yerushalayim. And then after the Shechita, one of the children comes first to Yerushalayim. And we say that child is the one that's counted on the carbon. So Shema Mina, similar to what we had before. Again, the Gemara says, we see from here, Yesh Pereira, that after the fact, after the Shechita, now that this son came first into Yerushalayim, this clarifies retroactively that he is the one that the father intended to include. So we can see here this concept of Yesh Pereira. Rabbi Yechanan says, no, there's no raya from here. That's not the way you understand this Mishnah. Really, the father meant to count all of his children in the carbon. The only reason he said whoever is going to come first is going to be counted because he wanted to be mizares his children to come quickly to Yerushalayim. So he was saying that whoever is going to be coming first, he's going to be the leader. He's going to be the one that I'm going to include first. But everyone else really is going to be included as well. So he wanted to include all of them. So it's not, you're not being mevarer who yeah and who not. They're all included. He just was saying it to be mizares them b'mitzvahs. I'll prove to you that this is the pshat of the Mishnah here. Because then the Mishnah says, that the one son, he's counted on the carbon, because he came in first, and then he includes all of his brothers with him. Now, how does he include all his brothers with him? If you're going to say that really the father meant to count all of the brothers, all of his sons on the carbon Pesach, so Shaper, we understand how they could all be included, because the father included all of them. If you're going to say that the father did not count all of them, after the carbon was already shechted, could this one son that's included go and count the rest of the brothers as well? It's too late. Vatnan, it says in the Mishnah, this is the next Mishnah right over here, Nimnin u'mayshchen yedeyen mimenu, you could be counted and you could also remove yourself of a carbon Pesach, acha yishachet, until the time of the Shechita, but not past the time of Shechita. So if it says here in the Mishnah that the other brothers could be included in the carbon Pesach, and it's talking even about after the Shechita was done, so it must be that the father really counted all of them in the beginning. Shema Mina, so this is clear that this is the pshat of the Mishnah. The father only meant to encourage the children to come, so he said, the one that's going to come first, I'm going to include him. But really they were all counted. Tanya Nami Hachi, we can see this also in the way this inyan was explained in a Braise, because it says in a Braise, it says that Maise, there was once an incident that happened similar to what it said in our Mishnah, that the father was telling his children, whoever's going to come first will be included. And what happened was, V'kodmu banais labanim, the girls, they were quicker and they came before their sons. And v'nimtza, it came out that bonois, zrizais, the girls were the ones that were quick, and they were counted first. Ubanim shvelim, and the children were shvelim, they were lower than the daughters. So what does it say here? It doesn't say in this braise that it came out that the daughters were counted and the sons were not counted. If we're going to learn the pshat like we originally thought in the Mishnah, that the father said, I'm only going to include the one that came first, and the other ones that did not come first will not be included. So why does it say zrizais and shvelim? It should have said that the banim were not counted. You see here from this braise, clearly everybody was counted. But the question is, who's counted first, and who's the leader, who's counted, who's a zariz, and who's a shuffle? But really, they were all counted.
Then you learn something. What is Rikya?
Oh, this is the next Mishnah. Let's see right over here. Zok the Mishnah, La'olam nimnin olav, you could always be counted on the Korban Pesach. At sheyiyah b'kezayis l'chol echad ve'echad. It has to be enough for a kezayis, for each one to be able to be yaitzeh mitzvah of Korban Pesach. And the Mishnah says, Nimnin u'mayshchen esideyem, you could be counted, and you could also remove yourself of a Korban Pesach, mimenu, at sheyishochet, until the time of the shechita. That's Tanakama. Rab Shimon says, Ad sheyizrek adam, until the time of the zrika of the blood, you could be counted on the Korban Pesach, as the Gemara is going to explain now. But the Gemara starts with the first case of the Mishnah. What did it say in the first case of the Mishnah? That you could count as many people as you want in the Korban Pesach, as long as everyone has a kazayas. Fragt the Gemara, Mai kamash malon. What's the chiddush? Obviously, if there's a kazayas, he can be counted. If not, you can't. So the Gemara, ha kamash malon. What this Mishnah, when it says lo oilam nimnin, always you could count. What it's saying is as follows: the afagav, the imni olav chabura zu. Even if you counted, you included a full chabura of people for the Korban Pesach. The entire group could decide that they want to remove themselves from this Korban Pesach, and you could bring a completely new group on this Korban. That's the chiddush of lo oilam nimnin, that you could exchange the entire group. So Rashi points out that this is not like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in about 10 blat and Daf Tzadik Tes. Rabbi Yehuda says that even if people can remove themselves from a Korban Pesach, but you can't remove the entire group. But this Mishnah is saying, L'oilam nimnin olav, that you could always remove the entire group as long as there's a kazayis for each one of them, it doesn't matter. Then it said in the Mishnah, nimnin emoshel nesideim at sheyishachit, that you have the time until shechita to count yourself on the Korban Pesach, and Rab Shimon said until the time of the zrika of the blood. Says the Gemara, Omer Abaye machloikis limoshech. The argument over here is only regarding removing yourself from the Korban Pesach. And the Rabbanan Savri, so the Rabbanan's opinion is mihiyos miseh. When the pasuk talks about counting yourself on the animal, it says v'mimet habayis mihiyos miseh. How do you read the words mihiyos miseh? Michiyusei deseh. In the time when the lamb is still alive. Until the time of shechita, when this lamb is still alive, so then you could remove yourself from the Korban Pesach. Rab Shimon says, you read the pasuk differently. Mahaviyasei deseh. From the happenings, from what you do with the seh, which refers to the aveda that's done with the seh, which refers to the zrika. Until the time of zrika, you could remove yourself from this Korban Pesach. However, when it comes to being counted on the Korban, divrei hakoil, everybody agrees, achi yishachit. You could only be counted on a Korban until shechita. Because by shechita the pasuk says, b'michsas nefashos, you count the souls, you count the people on the Korban, and v'hadar tachaisu, and then the pasuk says tachaisu, which means to shecht. So you could only be counted until the shechita. That everybody agrees. Tanya Nami Achi, it says this clearly in a braisa as well. Nimnin u'meishchen esidein mimenu at sheyishachet. You could be counted and you could remove yourself of a Korban Pesach until the time of the shechita. Shimon Aimer, Rab Shimon says nimnin at sheyishachet. He agrees that you could only be counted until the time of shechita. Or u'meishchen at sheyizarek adam. You could remove yourself until the time of zrika. Zok the Mishnah. Hamemane imoi acher bechelkoi. So what happens if you have a person that was counted on a Korban Pesach together with a group, and then one individual decides to invite someone else together with him? In other words, he does not consult everybody else in the group. He does not ask everybody else about this. He decides to be a guest that's bringing in another guest, and he brings in another person together with him in the Korban Pesach. Rashoen b'nei chabura liten loyas shaloi. The people of the group can say to him, listen, if you're inviting other people together with you without asking us, so take your portion of the Korban Pesach and eat separately. Separate yourself from our group. And v'hu oichel mishaloi. And then this person will have to eat from his part that they gave him himself. And v'hein oichel mishalahem. And they eat from theirs. shares. In other words, the Korban Pesach will be divided into two separate groups. Rashi says this is based on what we learned in the previous Mishnah, that one Korban Pesach is allowed to be divided into two groups. So if this person is inviting other people without asking anyone else's opinion, so then they can separate him and say, you go separately, eat your own part alone without us. Talk to Gemara. From the same Korban Pesach, yeah, you could divide one Korban Pesach into two. But the point is, if this person is inviting other guests, and these other guests are going to join with their Korban Pesach, the people of the group are afraid that the guests that he's going to invite are going to eat up from all the Korban Pesach. So they give him his kazayas, or his part, and they say, here, go, make your own group. You want to invite people? Invite them on your own portion. Don't invite them on our cheshbon with the entire Korban Pesach. If they will, they will. If they won't, they won't. That they're giving him his portion. Zokti Gemara, Ibaya Lahu. So now the question was asked. B'nei Chabura shahayu yadav shel echad mehen yafis. You have a group of people, and you have one person that Rashi says the Gemara is using a nice language, but it means that a person that eats a lot. He eats quickly and he eats a lot. So they have one person, so they see that he's eating a lot of the Korban Pesach. Mahu sheyayimru loi. So what's the din? Could they go and tell him, Tel chelkacha, here, take your portion, and v'tzei, and leave our group and eat your portion, and don't sit here with us and eat so much from this Korban Pesach. Mi amrinon, do we say, matzi amalahu, this person that's eating a lot could say to them, hakabiltun, you accepted me in the group, you know who I am. So you accepted me in the group. Once you accepted me, so you have to leave me together with your group. Oidilme or matzi lemei malei, they can tell him, ki kablinon litakunizviche. We will makabel you in order to eat together with us, because there's so much meat there, so we want the carbon that's shechted to be fully eaten. We don't want there to be any nicer, so we want you to eat a normal portion, so there shouldn't be nicer. But adaita da'achlis tfei minan leikablinach, we never accepted you to be joined in the group to eat so much, eating so much, and therefore take your portion and leave our group. So that's the question. Once they accepted him, could they not tell him to leave the group or not? Tashema, so the Gemara says, let's bring a raya from what it says in our Mishnah. A person that joined the group, and then he's bringing guests along with him, without asking anyone else in the group. So the people of the group can tell him, take your portion and go. And he has to eat his part separately. And then the group eats their portion separately. So we see that a person that's bringing someone else that's going to eat too much, they can tell him to leave. So l'chayra, the same thing, my time. What's the reason why they can tell this person to leave? Lav mishum da havalek yadayim shel echad mem yafis. Because in a case where this guy is inviting other guests, it's like a person that eats so much, and they're concerned that he's going to eat up most of the Korban Pesach or too much of the Korban Pesach. So we should say the same thing over here. If you have just one person that's eating too much, you can tell him, go leave and eat your portion, and don't stay together with us. Dr. Gemara, v'isal kedaitoch. Yadav Yafis, Matzi Amalu Kabiltun. And if you're going to say that in a case where a person is eating a lot, so he can tell the group, listen, you accepted me, it's too late. Nahevi Hai Ki Yadav Yafis. So this person that's inviting guests, so let him say, you accepted me for whoever I am. If I eat a lot, you accepted me to eat a lot. If you accepted me, that means also to bring guests as well. So how could they tell him to leave? So the Gemara, Omri, they answered, it's not the same thing. Like, Deya is Shani. It's different when you have one person that's eating a lot, and over here you have a question whether you can tell him to leave, and the Mishnah, which is Deya, he's inviting other people. Other people? Deya, other people with their opinions. Who says the group is interested in having these individuals, these people in the group? The issue is not only that they're eating more, but the issue is also the people. Maybe they don't want these people to join with them. The inami tarvayu kechad b'bnei chaburu hu da'achlin matzi amri le de lenichlan inish nuchra gaban. Even if you're going to say that this person over here in the group that he's eating, and he's eating so much, but that's not an issue. But over here, when it comes to this person, which is a stranger that they didn't invite, they can tell him, we're not interested in having this other person over here. So therefore, there's no comparison in a case of a person that's inviting a guest and a case of a person that's eating a lot.
Even guests, don't they have to be memuna on the Korban before?
So one person could be memana him in advance. Who's the one that's in charge to be memana? Yeah, he was memana him before the shechita.
Without letting go.
Yeah, but that's the problem. He didn't let anyone else know. So therefore the Mishnah said they can tell him to go and take his portion separately. Toshama, we learned in a braisa, or actually we had this before, in a braisa, Hashamish she'achal kezayis basar b'tzad atara. So there was the servant, and he takes care of the Korban Pesach, and he was roasting the Korban Pesach, and he by mistake forgot, and he went and tasted the kezayis of the meat over there by the oven where he was roasting it. So imaya pikeach, so the Braisa says, if he's smart, memale kreisai mimenu, so he eats the entire Korban Pesach over there where he is. And the reason is because he's not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach in two different places. He's not allowed to eat it there by the oven, and then when he comes back to the group and eat the Korban Pesach there, because one individual is not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach in two places. If the people of the group want to do a favor for him, they eat together with him over there where he's eating. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. But otherwise, if they don't want to do him this favor, they can say, listen, you made a mistake and you started eating the Korban Pesach in one location. Don't make us come to eat together with you now. You made that mistake, you're going to have to eat over there alone. And even though we did join you in our group, but once you ate over there, you're going to have to be separate from our group. You're going to eat by the oven, and we're going to eat in the dining room. We're going to eat separately. So what do we see from this? Ratzu in, loy ratzu loy. Only if they want to be nice to him, they can come into the kitchen and eat together with him by the oven. But if they're not interested, they can say, yes, we did join you in our group in the beginning, but now that you began eating separately, so too bad, we're not going to come together with you. You can't be matriach us to come and eat together with you. Fragt the Gemara, why do we say this? Why doesn't he say to the people of his group, Ha kabilton, you already accepted me to be together with you in the group, and once you accepted me, so you have to always be together with me, and we have to eat the Korban Pesach together, even if that includes you now having the tercha to come and join me in the kitchen. So we don't say that. So if you don't say that over there, so the same thing over here, when you have a person that's eating too much, so you don't say that once he's accepted, so then he can eat however much he wants. Just like you're not matriach them to come and eat with him in the kitchen, a person that's eating a lot, so the people of the group could say, we accepted you, but not to eat so much. That's the comparison the Gemara is making here. So the Gemara, no, Shani Hasam, it's not the same thing. In that case, when you have a servant that began eating in the kitchen by the oven, in that case, it's different. The Amri Lei, because the people of the group could say to him, yes, we did accept you, and we made up, we're going to eat the Korban Pesach together. But Ki Kablinoch, when did we accept you to eat it together? Adaita de Nitrechach Kamon, only with the das, that you will be working for us. This guy was a servant. He was supposed to serve them, and not the other way around. We didn't accept you in our group that we're going to have to go out of our way to come to you in the kitchen. You're supposed to be the one in the kitchen that's serving us in the dining room. The other way around, for us to come in the kitchen, we never had such a das to accept you in this way. So therefore, in that case, you can understand why they don't have to include him in the group anymore. But in the case of a person that's eating extra, in such a case, maybe he could still say, you included me in the group, even if I'm eating extra, you have to leave me inside the group.
Sounds like I got it.
What can they
Yeah.
do then? Why do you have to go to
Because the halacha is, one person is not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach in two different groups. Once he started eating in the kitchen, that's his location of the Korban Pesach. He's not allowed to complete eating it in the dining room in another place. Toshama, sagt the Gemara, we have another Braise, B'nei Chabure Shehoyu, so it says clearly in the Braise, B'nei Chabure Shehoyu Yodav Shalechad Mem Yofais. You have one person of the group that's eating a lot. Rasha and Loima, they're allowed to tell him, Teil Chelkacha V'tzei, take your portion and eat separately. And don't be here together with us because you're going to eat too much. Take your portion and go. V'lo yoid, and not only this, it's not only regarding the Korban Pesach. Ela fila chamisha v'asu sibailas. Even 5 people that are joining together in a sibailas, which means a suda. They're joining together in a suda on any day of the year. Rasha and laimula, if you have one person that's eating up most of the food by the suda that they joined together, so the people are allowed to tell him, Toil chalkacha v'tzei, take your portion and leave. We didn't realize that you're going to eat most of the suda. Shmamina. So you see here very clearly that this is the halacha regarding a Korban Pesach and regarding all year. So the Gemara now, my v'loyoid. What does the Braisa mean when it uses the expression v'loyoid and not only this? So the Gemara explains, Loimi boya ka'amar. Loimi boya Pesach, needless to say when it comes to Korban Pesach, the Matzi Amri Lei, so they can tell him, Ki kablinach l'tkuni zviche. Over here they have a very good reason to explain to him why they're sending him away. Even though we already accepted you, but we accepted you on the carbon, that you should eat the normal portion of a carbon, that it shouldn't be nicer. Even when it comes to just a regular Suda, where they don't have this excuse, they don't have this explanation to say that we accepted you just to eat, that it shouldn't be nicer. They're just joining together in a meal. Even though originally they joined together and they agreed to eat together, they're still allowed to tell him, say, take your portion and leave our Suda. Others say as follows. This case that we spoke about until now, when you have one person that's eating a lot and he's taking so much that the question was whether the people of the group could send him away. In that case, there's really no question. They could definitely send him away. But there's a different question in a different case. The question was really as follows. B'nei Chabura, people in a group that decided to join together in one group. Rashan l'chalik, or yein rashan l'chalik. Are they later on allowed to split the group or not split the group? So this is a question. Yeah, let's say you have a group, and let's say it was 30, 40 people, and they thought they'll have enough space, and then they realize they don't have enough space. Or whatever, for whatever reason, people want to divide the group into two. Are they allowed to divide the group into two later or not? So it's a shaila in general regarding dividing a group of a Korban Pesach. So Toshama, so the Braisa, we bring back the Braisa that we brought before as a raya to this. If one person is eating too much, so then they can tell him that take your portion and leave. So what do you see from this Braisa? Yad of Yafa is in. When could you separate one person from the group? Only if he's eating extra. But Ein Yad of Yafa is loy. But if it's a case where you have all people that join together in a group, you can't come and split the group later for no reason. If they join the Chatchile, they all have to eat together the Korban Pesach. Rav Pape v'Rav Hune Shma Mino. So this is a raya to this question as well. Rav Pape v'Rav Hune bereid Rav Yeshua. Irvu rifte bahadi adodi. So they ate together. They were eating together bread. They joined together in a suda. So ad achar Rav Huna bereid Rav Yeshua chada. While Rav Huna bereid Rav Yeshua was able to eat only one bread, achar Rav Papa arba. In that time period, Rav Papa ate 4 pieces. Malay. So Rav Huna bereid Rav Yeshua tells Rav Papa, plagli, give me my portion. I only ate 1 bread and you already ate 4. Amalei, so Rav Papa says to Rav Huna bereid Rav Yeshua, kabilton. You accept me to join together with you in the meal for whatever I'm able to eat. So this is what I'm able to eat. So this is what I'm eating. So Amalei, so kabilton, yeah, he accepted me. So Eisvei kol hani to yufte. So Rav Huna bereid Rav Yeshua asked Rav Papa all the questions that we brought before about a person that's Yad of Yafais, that you can send them away from the group, and Vishani Kiddishaninon. And he gave them the answers. The Gemara before gave the answer, from all the different places that we brought, that there's no Rai from our Mishnah. When you have a person that's inviting guests, the Gemara gave all the answers, and he asked him the question, and he gave all the answers that we said before. And then Eisvei, he asked him the question from this last Braisa that we had over here, B'nei Chabura, when you have a case of B'nei Chabura, and it said in the Braisa that when you have B'nei Chabura and one person is eating too much, you could send him away from the group. So he told Rav Papa, look, you have a Braisa that says one person that's eating too much, you could send him away. That was the conclusion of the Gemara before. So the same thing over here, if there's one person that's eating too much, I can send you away. On Malay, so he told him, no, you bring me the Braisa which is speaking about a Korban Pesach. Hasam the Omri Lei, the only reason they could send him away is because they can tell him, Ki kablinach l'tkun izviche, because it's a carbon. And they can tell him, we only accepted you to eat your portion of what's needed for the carbon, that it shouldn't be nicer. But that doesn't apply to any Suda, that a person that's eating extra, you could send them away. But then, Eisvei Sibailes, he asked them from what it says in the end of the Braisa. The end of the Braisa, it says, regarding any Suda, that anytime you join another person in a Suda and he's eating extra, you could send them away. So Paligle, so then when he asked him from what it says there in the Braisa, he gave him his portion and he gave him his part. So Azal Arev Bahadi Ravina. So now Rav Huna bereid Rav Yeshua was looking for another partner. So he went to join together with Ravina. So what happened? He thought he's going to have a better partner. Ada Ocha Rav Huna bereid Rav Yeshua Chada. While Rav Huna bereid Rav Yeshua was eating only 1 piece of bread, Ochel Ravinit Manya, he ate 8 pieces of bread. So now Omar, now Rav Huna bereid Rav Yeshua said, Meya Papi, it's better to have 100 Rav Papas, V'loi Chada Ravina, and not 1 Ravina that eats 8 times as much as I'm eating. Okay, Adkan. Yeah, I'm sure the Sisrei Taira here.